Hello and welcome to Cyber Threat Thursday. I'm Kristin Todt, the founder and CEO of the Cybercrime Support Network, and I am so excited to be here with my friend Kiersten Todt and to talk about all the great work that she does at the Cyber Readiness Institute. It's a really important nonprofit organization who's serving small businesses in a way that really hadn't been done before. So Kiersten, could you please start by telling everybody a little bit about yourself and how many times you have to answer to the name Kristin, Kirsten, Christian. So we have that in common right off the bat, right?
We do indeed. And my last name also creates all sorts of chaos as well. So yeah, absolutely. So I'm Kiersten Todt. I'm the managing director of the Cyber Readiness Institute. I've spent a lot of time in government, in the White House, in the Senate, worked on the legislation for DHS, which is how I got involved in cybersecurity. And in 2016 was asked by President Obama to run his commission on enhancing national cybersecurity. And following that, some of the commissioners and myself came together to found this nonprofit, the Cyber Readiness Institute, which provides free cybersecurity tools for small businesses with the recognition that obviously small businesses are a critical component of supply chains worldwide, and we have to do more to help them improve their cybersecurity and give them the resources that are very accessible to the large companies.
Well, and especially right now, being no-cost services is really important as so many small businesses are struggling with pandemic issues. Then you add on top of that the increase in cybercrime. So I think that's really important too, that those are available. And tell me a little bit about the commission. What was that work like? And what did you do there?
Sure. So one of the catalysts for the commission was there was the breach of the Office of Personnel Management that happened in the end of the Obama administration. And when that happened, President Obama identified that there really wasn't anyone at a senior level in the White House who he could turn to say, from a cyber perspective, what happened. The person at the time that had that in her portfolio was Lisa Monaco, but her day job also included Homeland Security, counterterrorism, and others. And so it was this recognition that we had to really elevate the work of cybersecurity. And so the commission itself was asked to look at 8 issues that really looked at the security of the digital economy, one of which was small businesses, as well as critical infrastructure, R&D, education, workforce, and others. And we spent 7 months putting together a roadmap for the incoming administration so that when the new administration came in, they weren't starting from ground zero, but were able to build off of what had been done. I'm a believer, and Kristin, I know you and I have talked about this, cybersecurity is not a political issue. And we don't do ourselves any favors by making it a political issue, that the work of everybody we have to build off of that and understand from the lessons learned. And I do think, when we look over the last 4, 8, 12 years, that has been a success in the sense that we've been able to work off of the successes of the past and understand where our vulnerabilities are.
Absolutely. And you can see in the Cyberspace Solarium Commission, they had, I think, 26 items, recommendations just passed in the NDAA, which, this is a bipartisan issue. Anyone can be impacted by cybercrime, and everyone is being impacted at some level, regardless of where they sit in the political spectrum. That's great. I appreciate that. So dive in a little bit for me about the Cyber Readiness Institute. Tell me really, who is it made up of? Who comes to the table there? And what is your goal what do you want to achieve?
Yeah, so I'll give a little anecdote on the history. So in 2013, 2014, I worked on the development of the National Institute of Standards and Technology Voluntary Cybersecurity Framework. And when we were talking about that was a framework for critical infrastructure. NIST and others and from government and industry, we were adamant about this is not about the mom and pop pizza shop on the corner. This is about critical infrastructure. Fast forward a couple of years, and just with the increase in the proliferation of IoT devices, Internet of Things, and just the interdependencies that now exist across infrastructure, this recognition that the lines on what is and is not infrastructure are very blurred because we're so connected. And when we were finishing up the commission, one of the commissioners, the CEO of MasterCard, Ajay Banga, we talked very specifically about the fact that we hadn't really helped small businesses enough. One of the things that we've always done is we've taken the resources available to big businesses and kind of think that if we shrink them down for small businesses, they'll be appropriate. And I make the analogy to pediatric medicine. For a long time, we just sort of thought, take adult medicine and just make it smaller for children. But we now understand pediatric medicine to be a distinct discipline. Doesn't mean that the destination isn't the same. We want healthy children and healthy adults. We want secure and safe small businesses and secure and safe large businesses. But how we get there has to be different. And so the premise of the Cyber Readiness Institute was to convene large companies like MasterCard, Microsoft, ExxonMobil, General Motors, Principal, that all say we know the importance of small businesses in our supply chains, our value. And so we're going to come together to provide and share resources to help inform the development of the tools that the Cyber Readiness Institute has spent the last 4 years building.
That's fantastic. And I did not know you were involved in the cybersecurity framework. I'm a bit of a NCF geek myself. And I don't know if you know, but I did a LinkedIn learning course on how to use the NIST cybersecurity framework for small businesses. So I just took the 5 principles of identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover, and use those as a framework for small businesses to think about what they're doing. So obviously, like you said, it was meant for critical controls, but I thought there was so much good meat in there that if we put it in language that small businesses could understand, and the course has been viewed by, I think, over 100,000 people worldwide. So, people have really appreciated having a way to think about cybersecurity. And I think the NIST framework has so many implications. I'm even using it as a guide for my Cyber Tip Tuesdays. We're starting with Identify. So thank you for working on that. It's been such an important part of the way I educate people on cybersecurity.
That's
so
great.
Thank you for explaining the part about, how you came together. So now what is a day-to-day action that the Cyber Readiness Institute is working on?
So we launched in July of 2017, and our first real assignment for ourselves was to build that first piece of content. And so we spent the first part of the Cyber Readiness Institute building what we call the Cyber Readiness Program. And this program is a self-guided program for small businesses that takes them through about 5 stages of activities. And what it does is we very much focus on human behavior, with the idea that small businesses can't always afford to buy the next latest and greatest technology and to be kept up to speed on technology. It's not to say that they don't use that, but we really go with the premise that human beings are at the foundation of cybersecurity, and that human beings can be your greatest vulnerability, but they can also be your greatest asset if they're educated and informed. And recognizing the limited resources that small businesses have, you have this tool set at your disposal with your employees. And so the idea of empowering employees and helping them understand their individual accountability and responsibility for cybersecurity can help small businesses build out. So the program itself is 5 stages. It asks companies to go through an assessment of what's important to them, to identify somebody within the organization that can shepherd the organization through this program. We have an assessment tool at the beginning as well as at the end, so companies can measure their impact. But the premise, the substance is these 4 issues in human behavior, which is phishing, patching, authentication, and USB use. And we've created templates for policies that are all based in human behavior, everything from multi-factor authentication to passphrases to clicking on software updates. And so that's the foundation of what we do. But in the pandemic, what we started to do was create a series of additional digestible guides on, here are the 5 tips you need for securing a remote workforce. We worked with the Department of Homeland Security on developing a ransomware playbook, what you need to know before an event and what you need to know during an event with the decision tree. And so over the last 12 months, we've done a lot more of those guides, and we find those to be very effective and impactful for small businesses because they're digestible. They're about 2 pages, and it's tips. It's very simple things. Here are the things you can do. And like everything, including the NIST framework, these are not the holy grail. It's recognition that these are all tools to help you build your toolkit as a business to know what's important to you.
That's right, because it is going to be a little bit different for everybody, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
And you talked about, there was phishing, USB, what were the other 2 that were the key issues?
Patching, software updates, and authentication. So, we know, and you would know this in everything that you do, that, the greatest vulnerability that we have is strong authentication, or weak authentication and not making it strong enough.
Yes.
We can pretty much, forensically go back to every breach. And there was a statistic at one point in 2017 that every major breach in the US sourced with weak authentication. And we continue to see it. SolarWinds, there was an app that had, password 123. And we continue to see this challenge. And it's just a huge vulnerability.
And as much as you and I talk about it, we still need, I think, hopefully sometime we can encourage the companies that do the software and put out these free services to build it in. One of the things I like to talk about is, when the banks started making two-factor authentication or multi-factor standard, they were a little worried. The first bank that was out there was like, well, is everyone going to go to that other bank? And I think what happened was people said, actually, I'm glad you're securing me. And then they weren't so upset about two-factor. And once they got to use it, they realized it's not that cumbersome. Now, 5-10 years ago, it was pretty cumbersome. And you probably had to be a little more technically savvy to use it. But now it's not cumbersome. And so I really would love to see is maybe some research done. If anybody wants to do research with me, let me know. That shows, are people more concerned about the friction of being a victim or the friction of using two-factor? And maybe we can start building it in to social media or email or more platforms because we know it helps. I mean, the security people, we know. I've been preaching 2FA for 10 years now. I mean, the FIDO Alliance works so hard every year trying to come up with a way to make it more usable and more effective. So I think we really just need to advocate that it starts to be built in like the financial institutions did. I think the people will come along with us. What do you think? Do you think they'd be okay with if it was there already?
And I think, I've talked, I think the challenge is in the commercial sector, the ROI on two-factor is not what it needs to be. I mean, I think there are a lot of incentives and market issues that come into play here, which is why, I'm a believer that market incentives need to be built in, but where market incentives fail and where the market fails, you have to come in a little bit stronger. And there's two-factor authentication. Even just a few years ago, it was cumbersome, but now everyone sees it as a tool that they can execute on, that they know makes themselves more secure. And I think if we get to a place where consumers start prioritizing security, then businesses will be incentivized to do the same. And right now, the model is very much about speed to market and speed and use, much more over security. I mean, there was an NSTAC report a few years ago that talked about first to market trumping secure to market. And that is really what we're always dealing with. And we've got to be able to push some of these basics into how we build security into products. Because left to the devices of some of the commercial companies, they will, tell you off the record that it's not, commercially viable for them to institute that. And we've got to be able to create those market incentives.
We do. And then we also need to hear the voice of the people who have been a victim. I was a victim on PayPal 5 years ago. I didn't know what two-factor authentication was. I forgot what year it is now. But as soon as I realized my PayPal was breached, I called PayPal to talk to them. I said, oh, have you ever added two-factor authentication? I'm like, no, bring it on. I'll do it.
Exactly.
And so once someone has been breached and had their accounts hacked, I think it's a great time to get them on board. But eventually, we're all going to have been a victim at one time or another. And so maybe people will start saying, look, I want my companies that I work with to put this in there for me, because we're not going to get everybody to opt in.
Right.
It can be difficult. Yeah. Now let's talk about phishing. I mean, that obviously, how do people get your password and break your authentication? It's usually through phishing. A lot of these other big hacks have been tied to phishing. What are you seeing on phishing, and how can you help folks?
Well, certainly in the pandemic, we've seen just an uptick in phishing because everybody's online all the time. And so we see much more creative and more accurate phishing attempts. In other words, the ability to really fake an identity of somebody that's relevant in a user's circle. It's more than just a bank. It can be something even more personal, a health club, a doctor's office. But I think the other piece, so one of the, when we look at phishing, we talk about hovering over the email of the sender to determine if it's viable. But now we're seeing a lot of mobile phishing, which are text messages that you can't actually figure out if they're fake by hovering or anything like that. And so it just is this real important step that if you don't know where something has come from, regardless of what it says, you've got to pick up the phone. It's another type of two-factor authentication, which is you receive something, don't just take it for that authentication. You've got to get somebody on the other line. And particularly in the pandemic, we've seen a lot of financial phishing. Wire this money, being able to fake a CEO's voice essentially in an email, using the language, using the approach to say to a CFO, wire this money. And I'm talking even at a small business level. So
it's happened here. It's happened to our small nonprofit. People said they were me, came in with an email address very similar to mine. They had copied my signature line and the way I speak. and said,
Yep.
this is urgent, hurry up, I need this right now. Fortunately, our team, we talk about this every day. So they noticed it was the fish and alerted everybody else. But you cannot be too small. I mean, we're a small nonprofit, 25 people, but we're still getting the CEO phishing. So everybody is a potential target for this. Would you agree?
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the key pieces. We hear a lot from small businesses, why would somebody care? Why would someone want to breach me? And I think there are two pieces to this. So there's a documentary that's out now called The Social Dilemma. And in that documentary, it says, data surpassed oil as the most valuable global commodity about 2 years ago. Yeah. So any company that has data, which is every company, is valuable. They have a value that they don't even know. There's that piece. But then there's also that small businesses become an opening and an access point to larger businesses. And you don't need to look much further than SolarWinds to see what that looks like. But we go all the way back to Target being breached through the HVAC system. It's just a reminder that every business has a value chain that isn't just linear. It's not just the steps that you need to produce a product or deliver a service. It's all the viral connections, whether it is the CEO that goes to a health club or the CFO that has a network connected to a school because of their children. It's all of these pieces. And so the breaches can happen in multiple ways.
That's a really good point, because there's so much interconnectivity now that you can't really say, oh, well, even if I lock down just my business, everybody's going to be okay in my business, because you talk to other businesses. And I've done a lot of work with small governments, and small governments attached to the state system and then to the federal system to pull down funds or whatever, so people say, well, I'm just a small township in Michigan, why would anyone care? Well, because you attach to all the federal and state systems, and they know you probably don't have a CISO on staff. So why would I try and break into the state of Michigan when I can break into a small township? Exactly. It's a lot easier. Yeah. You talked a lot about patching too, and just catching up on automatic patching, having that built in. Do you have resources for small businesses on what that means and how to do that?
We do, and this is all in the program. And we also now provide some of this information in the guides. And so if you just go to the website, we have a tab for resources, and the guides are all in that, the ransomware playbook and others. But the program itself has these templates. And patching, one of the things that we realize with small businesses and just really with users is they don't always need to know the why, they need to know the how. But patching, I think it's an interesting one to talk about the why, because the analogies are very simple. You've got essentially a hole in your boat that the builder has identified, and they're giving you a way to patch that hole. And if you don't patch the hole, the ship is going to go down. And that's it's just this understanding that as long as you keep that hole, the longer you keep that hole open, the more exposure you're going to have. And so while it's certainly inconvenient sometimes to have your computer shut down for 10 minutes or whatever it takes to install that, it is one of the easiest things you can do to be more secure. And again, we look at the major breaches that have happened over the last couple of years, and many of them were just from systems that weren't patched. So literally,
Equifax, I think, they didn't do patch some open source.
Right. Yeah. And NotPetya and the ransomware attacks that were all about exposing. And so that really comes down to a very simple act that you can do. And I think it's important to recognize how simple and straightforward the act is and how significant the effect is if you don't do it. Because it's not one of these, you have to be a coder or an engineer to stop that type of hack. It's very much just about exposing the vulnerability.
Exactly. And I think that's something that is important for us to always be debunking the myth that cybersecurity is a technical thing, that you have to be a computer person. And that's just not true. Setting up automatic updates on your browser is something everybody can do. Yep. And what you all do at Cyber Readiness Institute is make that a simple process to follow. And I love that you use the word checklist, because whenever I did talks with small businesses, they would say, can you just get me a checklist? I don't want to learn all this stuff. Just show me what I have to do, Yep. And that's what Cyber Readiness does. Yeah. Just give me the 1, 2, 3. I'll do it. I know it's important. After the talks, they'd say, well, you convinced me I need to pay attention to this. Now just tell me what to do.
Yeah. Exactly.
And that's what I think they need. And so how do you get the word out to small businesses? What's been your path of getting this fantastic tool into people's hands?
So obviously we have our members and we ask them to be able to build it out. But I would say the more effective model that we have is we partner with organizations like yourself and others globally that are doing this as well, or that have networks of small businesses. So in the United States, we have the Information Sharing and Analysis Centers, the ISACs. There's the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. There are local chambers of commerce. There are broader global organizations like the United Nations, the World Economic Forum. So we partner with them and give them our tools. Everything that we have is free. And so we just ask them to distribute it to their network. And oftentimes we marry that with a webinar to kind of walk through the approach and the premise so that people can understand how easy this is. And just our goal is to get this out to as many small businesses globally as possible, not just for the use piece, but we're only as good as the small businesses that use it. And we learn constantly from the feedback. We have a small business advisory group, a council, where they're using the tools, and then they come back and give us feedback to say, this is working, this isn't working. And I'll just give an example. When we started the program and we first piloted it, one of the easy recommendations was use a 64-character passphrase. NIST recommends a passphrase, 64 characters, and we put that in, and it probably was within 48 hours that one of the pilot companies was like, 64 characters, we're lucky if we get the opportunity for 15. And so we went back to the experts and ourselves and did the research to learn that actually a 15-character passphrase is incredibly resilient. Obviously, the more, the better, but that there's a statistic that says it would take, 100 million years to decode it and all of this. But the idea is that we've got to hear from the small businesses what is actually reasonable. Because as you know, we can give you the most rigid security processes, but if they're not practical, if they're not reasonable, then they're not going to get done.
Yeah, I agree. And also I've had people, when I say, here's the best way to use a passphrase, they'll say, well, I tried that, but this system wouldn't let me. It capped me at 12 or something. And so it's a little frustrating as we're given this great advice, but then not everybody comes along at the same time. And, but it's a constant battle. I think we have a lot of job security in this field. People will need us for quite a while. Let's talk about the future a little bit. And where do you think Cyber Readiness Institute is going to go? What kind of things are you having on your vision for the next couple of years?
So a few different pieces. The first is we're obviously trying to get the content out to as many small businesses. That's always our underlying goal. Again, as I said, just to get that learning ecosystem. An aspiration that I have is to get to a place where we have some type of certification for the program that can even be white labeled, but where small businesses that use it are then are given a credential that's well known, sort of like an underwriter's laboratory that can help them access supply chains, that would also help them with cyber insurance to say, if you do this, you get this credit for doing so. And we know that you've got a baseline level. So it creates the market incentives that I talked about earlier. We are looking at cyber insurance this year and how to help small businesses navigate the space. I think it's a very confusing space and with a lot of backwards incentives. But in the near term, two primary goals for CRI, in addition to what I just talked about, are to help get these resources to minority-owned small businesses that don't necessarily have the access. We're seeing a lot of that, not just domestically, but globally, and create greater accessibility of technology for individuals with disabilities, audio, visual, and physical. And how do we get these tools and these resources that help technology work more effectively to these stakeholder groups?
Yeah, and that's why our missions are so aligned there. And I really appreciate that you're also looking for those force multipliers. And that's what we do is, we have great stuff. It's free. And then we push a lot of your stuff through our channels. But we need those force multipliers who can help us get it to. So we go to a lot of associations or, larger organizations that can help push it out, because we can't go one-to-one to every business. But if we can work with partners and provide good content, then that's, I think, really our job, is to make sure they have the content they need.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I like, are you seeing any changes in the types of threats besides the COVID stuff? Do you feel like if we continue, I personally believe if we continue on the phishing and the patching and those human issues, I think we're going to be okay. I mean, if we can just get those things in place, I don't see any greater, issue coming up that wouldn't be helped by those security principles. Do you see anything else that people should be paying attention to coming up on the horizon?
I agree with you, because I think those issues are just being leveraged differently, right? We've always known about authentication as a breach. Now authentication, has been used for ransomware. and software updates and all those pieces. So I think we've really got to master that foundation. That's basic cyber hygiene. And if we can do that, I do think we'll be able to ward off whatever the evolving threat vector is going to be, because all the threats, they continue to capitalize and expose and compromise the vulnerabilities around software updates, phishing, patching, and otherwise. And so if we look historically, I talked about Target, I mentioned NotPetya with ransomware, SolarWinds, all of these, regardless of the sophistication of the attack, are really exposing the vulnerabilities that come from these basics. Yeah. So I would absolutely agree with you that we just have to focus on them.
Even OPM. I mean, I think two-factor was one of the things that was talked about there too. The Sony hack, I remember reading an article about two-factor. I'm like, oh my goodness. So I really want to keep advocating for building this security in. If there's 4 main things that could really make a big difference, I want to start getting, people out there from the consumer side, the market-driven conversations that the market needs to eventually say, look, I want it to be secure. I'd rather not be impacted by cybercrime. And can you please do it for me? I've heard it from so many small businesses. Can you please just tell me what to buy? Put it in there for me because I'm busy and I have to run my company. And now I've got to figure out PPP loans and all the stuff behind that too with COVID and figuring out 25% people in. There's a lot on their plates. And for them to be successful, I think the security experts and the companies could do a lot for them by building more in. So I'm always going to be advocating for that.
Absolutely.
And what we're starting as a program, I'm so excited about. Trend Micro just gave us some seed funding for our Securing Our Community program, where we're going to partner up tech savvy folks. That could be college students, anybody who feels they're tech savvy, and then partner them with someone in their life that's a little less tech savvy or small business in their community. And then go in and do a few things. We're looking at what those 4 things are going to be. One is obviously authentication on email and social media, learning about phishing, maybe having a malware product that will check your system for malware. And then another one I think probably would be setting your automatic updates on your browser and things like that. So we're excited to get that kicked off and be able to announce a couple key partners. But if we can get sort of an army of tech savvy people out there to go one-on-one to people they care about and change their security posture, not just talk to them about it. And I know education and awareness is very important. I've spent, most of my cyber career in education and awareness, but I really want to start changing people's security posture. So we're really excited about getting this program underway, and I'm sure we'll be working with you somehow on that. But
that's fantastic. Congratulations. That sounds like a tremendous project.
Thank you. Yeah, we really need to start changing people's security posture, and just telling them about it isn't going to do it. I think we have to sit down with some people and just do, I love that you have those 4 main things. If those are the 4 main things we sit down and do with people, we're going to improve their security by 85%, maybe more.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
It's when you water it down into those ideas, it doesn't seem like it's something that we can't accomplish. So. Great. Anything else you wanted to leave the audience with before we wrapped up about Cyber Readiness Institute?
Well, just, I encourage everyone to visit our website, cyberreadinessinstitute.org or becyberready.com. They both take you there. All of the resources, the program, very interested in the feedback from anybody that goes through the program and uses the resources to see, what's working, what's not. But we'll continue, like you, to be a part of this effort to just help small businesses and users be more secure and do it in a way that's accessible and empowering.
Thank you so much. And it's just fantastic to have someone like you on the show, because you really have been at that cyber leadership on a national level. And so thank you for continuing to help making the ecosystem safer for everybody.
Thanks.
Appreciate you taking time. I'm Kristin Judge from the Cybercrime Support Network. This has been our Cyber Threat Thursday with Kiersten Todt from the Cyber Readiness Institute. Check in on every Thursday around 1:15 Eastern, and then on Tuesdays at 3:05 Eastern for Cyber Tip Tuesdays. Thanks so much for joining us, and I hope you'll visit the Cyber Readiness Institute and start taking advantage of some of those great materials. Have a great day.